Everyone rushed to claim their mates. Liora stopped for a stranger bleeding in the gutter. Biggest mistake of her life, or the choice that would crown her? Because that stranger was the lost queen the Alpha King had been hunting for 12 years. He just arrived. And he's about to kneel before the rejected Omega who saved his mother's life. If you believe in stories where kindness wins and the rejected rise, subscribe to Seraphina's romance stories. Don't let this one slip away. The night was alive with destiny. The moon hung fat and silver over Erdal's cobblestone streets, casting long shadows that twisted like living things. Beyond the village walls, drums thundered from the forest clearing, deep, primal, relentless. Torches flared orange against the darkness. Wolves held in harmony with something ancient and undeniable. The mating ceremony had begun. Pheromones thick as smoke drifted through the air, pulling unmated wolves toward the clearing like invisible chains. Liora stood in the narrow street outside the ruined apothecary, watching villagers rush past her as if she didn't exist. Young Omegas in their finest clothes. Alphas with hunger in their eyes. Betas hoping for miracles. All of them running toward fate. Liora did not move. She wrapped her thin cloak tighter against the October wind and stayed exactly where she was, invisible, forgotten, a cautionary tale no one wanted to acknowledge. The cold bit through the threadbare fabric, but she barely felt it. She'd learned to bear worse than cold. Rejected Omegas weren't supposed to linger near mating nights. She'd learned that lesson last year when her bond snapped before it ever formed, when her fated mate looked at her, felt the connection, and chose to walk away. The entire village had watched him reject her in front of the ceremonial fire. They'd whispered about it for months. Liora Ashbourne. The Omega even fate didn't want. So tonight, she stood in the shadows while destiny claimed everyone else. That's when she saw the old woman. You know what's worse than people who reject others? People who walk past someone in need and pretend not to see. If you're not one of those people, subscribe now, because this story is for those who still believe kindness matters. The woman was crumpled near the fountain, bent low beside the gutter like something discarded. Silver hair escaped a torn hood. Her hands shook violently as she tried to push herself up and failed. Villagers rushed past her, some nearly stepping on her, all of them blind to anything except the ceremony's magnetic pull. Liora's chest tightened. No one was stopping. No one even looked. Please, the woman's voice was barely a whisper, trembling with terror and confusion. Please. I don't know where I am. Liora moved without thinking. She dropped to her knees beside the stranger, ignoring the mud soaking through her dress. Up close, the woman looked even more fragile, weathered skin, clouded eyes, body shaking from cold or fear or both. Please, the woman said again, clutching at Liora's cloak with desperate, trembling fingers. I don't know where I am. I don't know who I am. Liora's heart cracked open. She unwrapped her only cloak, the one thing keeping the autumn wind from cutting straight through her, and draped it over the woman's thin shoulders. You're safe now, Liora said softly, helping her to unsteady feet. Come with me. The drums thundered louder. Howls echoed. Destiny was reaching its crescendo in the forest, bonds forming, futures locking into place. Every unmated wolf in Erdal was there. Except Liora. She turned her back on the ceremony and guided the stranger through empty streets. Liora's attic room was small, barely more than a closet above the abandoned apothecary. One chair. One blanket. A fireplace that barely worked. But it was hers, and tonight, it was shelter. The woman's hands were ice when Liora sat her down. Her breathing came shallow and broken. Liora built a fire with the last of her kindling, heated broth from yesterday's herbs, and wrapped the woman in her only blanket even though it left her shivering. What's your name? Liora asked gently, kneeling beside the worn chair. The woman stared at her with wide, terrified eyes. I can't remember. Tears slipped down weathered cheeks. There's only darkness. And a child. A boy crying in storms. Liora took the woman's frozen hands in hers. It's all right. Memory or no memory, you're not alone tonight. The woman looked at her with something like wonder. You have such warmth in you. Such kindness. I can feel it. They sat together while the ceremony raged in the distance, while futures were being sealed and bonds were being forged, and Leora's last chance at belonging was slipping away with every passing moment. She made soup from nothing. Found spare clothes she'd mended a dozen times. Prepared the corner of her room she'd never shared with anyone. The woman fell asleep whispering fragments about storms and crowns and a boy with silver eyes. Liora watched her sleep and felt something she hadn't felt since the rejection. Purpose. Not the hollow ache of being unwanted. Not the shame of being passed over. But the solid, quiet certainty that she'd done something right. Something that mattered more than fate or bonds or the village's judgment. Outside, the ceremony ended. Wolves howled in celebration. Newly mated pairs stumbled home, drunk on connection and possibility. And in a cold attic room, a rejected Omega tucked a blanket around a stranger and realized she'd just sacrificed her last chance at a bond. But for the first time in a year, she didn't feel like she'd lost anything at all. By morning, the whispers would start. The judgment. The village calling her foolish, desperate, pathetic. The Omega who'd missed the ceremony again, this time for a stranger no one else cared about. Let them whisper. Liora had found something destiny couldn't give her. She'd found meaning. What did she just give up, and what did she unknowingly save? If you're not the type of person who walks past someone in need, if you don't believe rejected people deserve cruelty, if you stand against villages that treat kindness like weakness, then subscribe to Seraphina's romance stories and comment what time you're seeing this. Only the cold-hearted scroll past stories like this. Don't be one of them. While Liora slept beside a stranger she'd saved, 300 miles away in a fortress carved from black mountain stone, a king stood alone in the dark, and refused to hope. Lucian Stormborn was not a man who bent. He stood on the battlements of Iron Peak Fortress, fur cloak heavy across shoulders scarred from 100 battles, dark hair whipping in the wind. The crown on his head was iron, not gold, not silver, forged from the swords of enemies who'd tried to break him and failed. His presence was the kind that made wolves lower their heads without thinking. Instinct. Survival. They called him the Storm Wolf. The Unconquerable. The Alpha King who'd united fractured packs with blood and ruthless strategy, who'd ended centuries of territorial war, who'd built an empire on strength that couldn't be questioned. But tonight, alone on stone walls that had witnessed his victories, Lucian felt nothing but hollow. Below him, the fortress buzzed with preparation. Another council meeting. Another demand. Another attempt to control the one thing he refused to give them. A queen. The door behind him opened. His beta, Marcus, approached carefully, the way everyone approached Lucian these days. Like he was a storm that might turn without warning. My king, Marcus said quietly. The council is assembled. They're waiting. Let them wait. Lucian. I know what they want, Marcus. His voice was edged steel. The answer is still no. Marcus hesitated. They grow more insistent. They say the kingdom needs stability. Needs heirs. They say 12 years without a queen is. 12 years without my mother is what it's been. Lucian's hands gripped the stone wall until his knuckles went white. Tell them I'll choose a queen when I'm ready. Not before. The silence stretched. Everyone knew the story. Everyone whispered about it when they thought he couldn't hear. The uprising 12 years ago on the northern borders. The attack that came like lightning. Lucian's mother, Queen Liora Stormborn, lost in the chaos. They'd found her cloak torn and bloodied. They'd found evidence of struggle. But no body. No closure. Just, gone. Lucian had been 19. Newly crowned after his father's death the year before. Too young to rule, too broken to grieve properly, too desperate to accept what everyone else already believed. That she was dead. He'd searched for 3 years. Sent scouts to every corner of the territories. Offered rewards that could buy kingdoms. Followed every rumor, every whisper, every impossible lead. He'd nearly destroyed himself hunting ghosts. Eventually, even Marcus had begged him to stop. She's gone, Lucian. You have to let her go. But Lucian had never learned how to let go of the people he loved. So instead, he'd buried the grief so deep it became part of his foundation. Turned pain into power. Became the king no one could question, the alpha no one could challenge. And refused every attempt to make him choose a mate. Because how could he bind himself to someone when part of him was still searching? Still listening for a voice that would never call his name again? The council believes, Marcus said carefully, that a queen would help you move forward. The council, Lucian said coldly, can believe whatever comforts them. My answer remains no. Marcus sighed. He'd known Lucian since they were children. He recognized the tone that meant the conversation was over. But then he hesitated. There's something else, Marcus said. Reports came in from the western villages. There was a mating ceremony 2 nights ago in Erdal. I don't care about ceremony gossip. A rejected Omega refused to attend, Marcus continued. Apparently caused quite a stir. They say she skipped it to help a stranger. Lucian's jaw tightened. Why are you telling me this? Marcus pulled a folded letter from his coat. Because the descriptions of the stranger match someone we've been searching for. An elderly woman. Memory loss. Silver hair. Disoriented. She's been living with this Omega for 2 months now. The world stopped. Lucian turned slowly, his wolf rising to the surface, every instinct screaming. Where? Erdal. 3 days ride west. Prepare the horses. Lucian was already moving toward the stairs. We leave within the hour. My king, perhaps we should send scouts first to verify. Now, Marcus. Lucian's eyes flashed silver, the alpha command so absolute that Marcus physically flinched. If there's even a chance. He couldn't finish the sentence. Hope was the most dangerous thing in the world for a man who'd learned to survive without it. Hope was the knife that had carved him open 1,000 times before. Hope was the enemy he'd defeated by refusing to feel it. But this was different. Silver hair. Memory loss. Disoriented. It couldn't be. It was impossible. 12 years. She'd be. If there's even a chance. Within the hour, Lucian Stormborn rode out of Iron Peak Fortress with 20 of his best warriors. They pushed through the night, through rain that turned roads to mud, through cold that would have stopped lesser men. Lucian felt none of it. His wolf clawed at his insides, desperate and wild. 12 years of grief crystallized into a single, impossible thought. What if? What if the universe had been cruel enough to take her, but merciful enough to give her back? What if a rejected Omega in a forgotten village had saved the one person Lucian would burn the world to find? The night stretched ahead, dark and full of terrible possibility. And for the first time in 12 years, the storm wolf, the unconquerable, allowed himself to hope. Even though hope had destroyed him before. Even though this could be another cruel trick. Even though he might arrive in Erdal to find nothing but another stranger and another shattered dream. He rode anyway. What happens when unstoppable power chases fragile hope? If you're not on the side of councils who pressure people to move on before they're ready, if you don't believe power means you can't feel pain, if you stand against anyone who thinks grief has an expiration date, subscribe to Seraphina's romance stories and comment hope is not weakness. The heartless won't. 2 weeks passed like quiet mercy. Anya, the name Liora had given the woman because she needed to call her something, grew stronger each day. The trembling stopped. Color returned to her weathered cheeks. She began to move around the small attic room without needing support, though her memories remained fractured, arriving in pieces too small to form a whole picture. Liora tended to her with careful devotion. Morning tea sweetened with the last of the honey. Afternoon walks through frost-touched fields beyond the village. Evening conversations by firelight, reading from salvaged books while Anya listened with eyes that held both sadness and wonder. "You have such a gift," Anya said one evening, watching Liora stir soup over the fire. "Kindness like yours, it's rare. Precious." Liora smiled softly. "You make it sound like something special." "It's just soup." "No." Anya reached out, touching Leora's cheek with papery fingers, a gesture that felt achingly maternal. "It's everything." Something in Leora's chest cracked open. She hadn't been touched with tenderness like this since her own mother died 5 years ago. Hadn't been looked at like she mattered, like she was worth protecting instead of pitying. "You remind me of someone," Anya whispered. "Someone brave. Someone strong." "I've never been called either of those things," Liora said quietly. Then they weren't looking closely enough. But the village was looking. And what they saw, they hated. The judgment started as murmurs and grew into open hostility. The rejected Omega who skipped another ceremony. Probably faked the whole thing for attention. Keeping that stranger around like she's playing at being needed. Liora felt their stares like brands when she walked to the market. Heard their laughter when she passed. The baker refused to sell to her. The herbalist turned her away. Even the children threw stones and shouted names she tried not to hear. Desperate. Pathetic. Even fate didn't want you. Some nights, lying awake while Anya slept, Liora wondered if they were right. If she'd made a terrible mistake. If she'd thrown away her last chance at belonging for a stranger who would leave the moment her memory returned. But then morning would come. Anya would smile at her over tea. They'd walk together through golden autumn fields, and Anya would squeeze her hand like she was precious. And Liora would know, bone deep and certain, that she'd made the only choice her heart could live with. The fragments came at strange moments. One afternoon, watching storm clouds gather, Anya went pale. "I remember storms," she whispered. "Thunder and lightning and someone screaming my name. There was fire. Chaos. I was running." Another evening by the fire, she touched the worn wood of Leora's chair and froze. "A throne," she said distantly. "I sat on a throne. Iron and stone. Cold beneath my hands." Leora's heart stuttered. A throne? But Anya's eyes had already clouded again, the memory slipping away. The most vivid fragment came 3 nights before everything changed. "A boy," Anya said, staring into the fire with tears streaming down her face. "A boy with silver eyes and my husband's dark hair. He was crying. Calling for me. I tried to reach him but the darkness took me." She turned to Liora, gripping her hands with sudden, desperate strength. "I had a son. I had a son. Why can't I remember his name?" Liora held her while she wept, feeling the weight of something vast and terrible pressing against the edges of their quiet world. Lucian Stormborn reached Erdal at dawn on the 18th day. The village froze the moment he entered the square. He was massive, built like legends carved from stone and shadow. Dark hair fell past his shoulders. Scars marked his face and hands. A fur cloak hung heavy across armor that had seen countless battles. The iron crown on his head caught the weak morning light like a weapon. But it was his presence that truly stopped hearts. Power rolled off him in waves, ancient, absolute, undeniable. Wolves who'd never bowed in their lives found themselves lowering their heads without thought. The Alpha King had come. And everyone knew exactly why. Lucian's eyes scanned the crowd with predatory intensity. "I'm looking for an Omega," his voice carried command that made lesser wolves physically tremble. "One who houses an elderly woman with silver hair." A shopkeeper pointed with shaking hand toward the old apothecary. "Liora." The attic room. Lucian moved like liquid death, 20 warriors following. The village parted before him like water before a blade. He found the crumbling building easily. Climbed the narrow stairs. Stood before a door that looked like it might collapse if he breathed too hard. He knocked once. Twice. The door opened. And Lucian Stormborn, who'd united kingdoms and conquered armies, forgot how to breathe. She was beautiful in the way survivors were beautiful. Dark skin glowing in firelight. Eyes that held both gentleness and unbreakable steel. She looked at him without submission, without the hunger or fear he'd seen in so many eyes. She looked at him like he was just a man. "Can I help you?" Her voice was soft but unbending. "I'm told an older woman lives here." His voice came out rougher than intended. "I need to see her." Something protective sharpened her features. "And you are?" "Lucian Stormborn. Alpha King." He watched carefully, saw no awe. Only assessment. Only a woman deciding if he was a threat to someone she protected. "The woman may be my mother." The words cracked something open between them. Understanding. Sympathy. The shared knowledge of what loss carved into a person's bones. "She's resting," Liora said firmly. "She's fragile. If you upset her. I just need to see her." And there it was, the storm breaking, the king reduced to a son. "Please." Liora studied him. This man who could command anything, begging for permission at her door. Finally, she stepped aside. "Follow me," she said quietly. "But if you make her afraid, crown or no crown, you'll answer to me." The door opened wider. Truth and kindness stood face to face. And the world held its breath. What happens when compassion stands face to face with power? If you're not the type who judges people for choosing compassion, if you don't believe rejected people deserve hostility, if you stand against villages that mock acts of kindness, subscribe to Seraphina's romance stories and comment, "Kindness is power." Only the cruel scroll passed. Liora led him through the narrow doorway into the small attic room that had become her entire world. The fire crackled softly. Anya sat in the worn chair by the hearth, wrapped in Leora's only blanket, reading from a salvaged book. She looked up at the sound of footsteps. And froze. Lucian stopped breathing. 12 years older. Thinner. Silver hair where rich brown had been. Lines carved by suffering around eyes that had once sparkled with laughter. But unmistakable. Undeniable. His mother. Mother? The word escaped like a prayer, like a wound, like something that had lived trapped in his chest for 12 years finally breaking free. Anya's book fell from trembling hands. She stared at him, this massive warrior, this crowned king, and her clouded eyes suddenly cleared like storm clouds parting. "Lucian," she whispered. "My Lucian?" The world shattered. Memory crashed into her like a tidal wave. Anya gasped, hands flying to her mouth as fragments became whole. The uprising. The attack. Being separated from her son. The darkness. Years lost. But before all that, before the pain, him. My son, she breathed, rising on unsteady legs. My boy. You're alive. You're. Lucian crossed the room in 2 strides and dropped to his knees before her. The Alpha King, feared by all, bowed to by none, knelt before an old woman in a borrowed blanket and wept. I searched for you, he said brokenly, pressing his forehead against her hands. I searched everywhere. Every village. Every territory. I never stopped. I never. Lucian. Anya cupped his face with shaking hands, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. My brave boy. Look how you've grown. Look what you've become. I thought you were dead. His voice cracked completely. I thought I'd lost you forever. I'm here. She pulled him close, this son who towered over her now, who wore a crown of iron and carried the weight of kingdoms. I'm here. You found me. Behind them, Liora stood frozen, hand over her mouth, watching a king become human. Outside, word spread like wildfire. Villagers gathered below the window. Lucian's warriors stood witness. The entire village of Erdal watched through cracks and doorways as the storm wolf, the unconquerable, held his mother and sobbed like the boy he'd been 12 years ago. It took long minutes for Lucian to compose himself. When he finally stood, wiping his face with shaking hands, he looked at Liora as if seeing her for the first time. Really seeing her. This Omega. This rejected, scorned woman who'd given up everything, warmth, food, her last chance at belonging, to shelter a stranger no one else noticed. She'd saved his mother's life. She'd given him back the one person he'd thought lost forever. You, he said quietly, voice still rough with emotion. You took her in. Liora nodded, uncertain under the weight of his attention. She needed help. While your entire village attended the ceremony. He stepped toward her, and something electric sparked in the air between them. While they chased their bonds, you chose mercy. It wasn't, Liora started. It was everything. His silver eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. You gave up your future for a stranger. I couldn't just leave her there. Lucian studied her, this woman who stood unbowed despite his size, his power, his crown. Something ancient stirred in his chest. Recognition. His wolf rose to the surface, tilting its head, scenting the air. Mate. The word whispered through him like lightning, like inevitability. His wolf knew before his mind caught up. This Omega. This brave, impossible woman who'd saved his mother without expecting anything in return. And from the way her breath hitched, the way her eyes widened slightly, she felt it too. The bond hummed between them, unspoken, undeniable, terrifying. Neither of them acknowledged it. Not here. Not now. But it pulsed in the space between their words like a heartbeat. Come with us, Lucian said finally, forcing his voice steady. You and my mother. Come to Iron Peak. Leora's stomach dropped. I don't. You saved her life. His voice gentled but lost none of its command. You sheltered her when everyone else looked away. You gave her safety when she had nothing. Let me give you the same. I didn't do it for reward. I know. And something warm crossed his face, respect, not dominance. Gratitude, not possession. But she'll need care. Familiar faces. Someone she trusts while her memories settle. He paused. And I owe you a debt I can never fully repay. Behind him, Anya reached for Leora's hand. Please, she said softly. Come with me. I don't want to lose you. Not when I've just found my family again. Liora looked between them, mother and son, queen and king, a family reconstructed by chance and her choice. Outside, she could hear the villagers whispering, their judgment sharpening into something uglier. She manipulated this. Planned it somehow. Always knew she was attention-seeking. Rejected Omega lands a king. How convenient. Salvation or danger? Reward or trap? I need time, Liora said finally. To think. Lucian nodded slowly. We leave at dawn. His eyes held hers. Whatever you decide, you'll always have my protection. And my gratitude. The bond pulsed between them again, golden, warm, patient. Waiting. What price does kindness demand when kings are involved? If you're not like those villagers who twist kindness into manipulation, if you don't believe good deeds deserve suspicion, if you stand against people who mock others for having pure hearts, subscribe to Seraphina's romance stories and comment, kindness needs no reward. The jealous won't understand. Liora had chosen Dawn. Chosen to follow them to Iron Peak because Anya had squeezed her hand and whispered please, and Liora had never learned how to deny kindness when it was asked of her. Now, standing in the grand entrance hall of Iron Peak Fortress 3 days later, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The palace was overwhelming. Marble floors polished to mirror shine. Tapestries woven with gold thread. Ceilings so high they disappeared into shadow. Servants in fine livery moved like ghosts through corridors that could swallow her entire village. Everything gleamed with wealth she couldn't fathom. Liora felt like a stain on perfection. She wore the same mended dress she'd worn in Erdal. Her hands were rough from work. Her shoes had holes. While Anya was whisked away by royal physicians, Liora stood alone in luxury that made her feel more rejected than any broken bond ever had. You don't belong here, a cold voice said behind her. Liora turned to find a woman in council robes, sharp-eyed, silver-haired, dripping with disdain. Behind her, 3 other council members watched with barely concealed hostility. Lady Seraphine, the woman introduced herself with venom. First Counselor. And you are the Omega who conveniently found our lost queen. I didn't know who she was. How convenient. Seraphine circled her like a predator. A rejected Omega with nothing. No prospects. No future. And suddenly you're sheltering royalty? You'll forgive us for questioning the timing. I helped someone who needed help. Or, another counselor sneered, you saw an opportunity and took it. Now you're here, in the palace, catching the king's eye. Quite the scheme for someone so lowly. The words struck like physical blows. Liora's hands clenched at her sides, fighting the shame that rose like bile. The king is grateful, Seraphine continued. But gratitude has limits. Don't mistake his kindness for anything more. You are not his equal. You never will be. They swept away, leaving Liora alone in golden halls that felt like a beautiful prison. She felt Lucian before she saw him. The bond had been whispering since that moment in her attic room, quiet, patient, impossible to ignore. But here, in his territory, it roared to life like wildfire. Mate. 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 Liora. His voice was gentle as he approached from a side corridor. I hope your rooms are comfortable. She couldn't breathe properly when he was near. The bond pulled at her like gravity, like drowning, like something beautiful and terrifying. They're more than I need. You deserve comfort. He stepped closer, silver eyes intense. You deserve everything. The bond flared golden between them. She saw him feel it too, saw his breath catch, his wolf rising to the surface. I need to tell you something, he said carefully. My wolf knows. Has known since the moment I saw you. He paused. You're my mate. The words hung between them like a blade. I know you feel it too, he continued softly. I can see it in your eyes. Hear it in your heartbeat. Liora stepped back, panic rising. I can't. I'm not asking you to accept it. His voice remained gentle, non-threatening. I'm simply acknowledging what is. What you choose to do with that knowledge is entirely yours. You don't understand. Her voice cracked. I've been rejected before. I felt a bond start to form and watched someone choose to walk away from it. From me. I can't, I won't, be claimed again. I won't belong to anyone. Most alphas would have pushed. Would have used dominance, command, the bond itself to override her fear. Lucian simply nodded. Then you won't be, he said quietly. The bond exists whether we acknowledge it or not. But I will never force it. Never use it against you. You are free to refuse me, Liora. Free to walk away. Free to stay and never accept what we are to each other. She stared at him, shocked. You would accept that? Live with an unclaimed bond? I would accept anything you chose. His eyes held hers with absolute sincerity. I've spent 12 years searching for my mother. I know what it means to lose someone precious. I will not become the reason you lose yourself. That evening, everything changed. Anya's memories had been returning in fragments throughout the journey. But that night, sitting with Liora in the Queen's chambers, the final piece clicked into place. The uprising, Anya whispered, face going pale. It wasn't random. It was orchestrated. Members of the council, they wanted me gone. Wanted Lucian young and malleable. Leora's blood went cold. The council? Some of them. The ones who fear his power. Who want to control him. Anya gripped Leora's hands. And now you're here. You saved me. You've earned his respect. They'll see you as a threat. As if summoned by prophecy, Liora found it the next morning. A knife. Placed carefully beneath her pillow while she slept. A message carved into the wooden handle. Leave or bleed. When Lucian saw it, his wolf nearly took over completely. You'll have guards. Protection. I'll move you to the secured wing where. No. Leora's voice was steel. Liora, they threatened you. They want you dead. So I should hide? She met his eyes without flinching. Become a prisoner for my own safety? I didn't save your mother just to become a caged bird in your palace. I'm trying to protect you. I don't want protection if it costs me my freedom. She stepped toward him, fearless. If I stay here, I stay in the open. Visible. Unbowed. Or I leave entirely. Those are my only options. Lucian stared at her, this Omega who refused to be owned, refused to be protected like treasure, refused to bend even when threats carved themselves into wood. And his respect for her deepened into something more dangerous than any bond. Then we do it your way, he said finally. But promise me, at the first sign of danger. I'll fight, Liora interrupted. That's what I'll do. I'll fight. Can love survive when power refuses to dominate? If you're not like those council members who see kindness as manipulation, if you don't believe women should be caged for protection, if you stand against people who use power to control instead of respect, subscribe to Seraphina's romance stories and comment freedom over chains. The controlling ones hate this message. The Frost Moon Festival arrived 3 weeks after the knife. Iron Peak's great hall blazed with light, hundreds of candles, massive fireplaces, crystal chandeliers catching moonlight through tall windows. Wolves from every territory gathered to celebrate the year's final full moon. Music. Dancing. Politics disguised as celebration. Liora stood near the edge of the hall in a dress Anya had insisted on, deep blue silk that made her skin glow, simple but elegant. She felt exposed. Visible. Exactly as she demanded. The council members who'd threatened her watched from across the room. Lady Seraphine's eyes were cold calculation. Others whispered behind jeweled fans, their hostility barely concealed. Lucian appeared at her side, commanding in black and silver, crown catching firelight. "You can still change your mind," he said quietly. "Stay in your chambers where it's safe. And prove them right?" Liora met his eyes. "That I'm weak? That I need to hide?" "No." His wolf stirred with pride and terror in equal measure. "You're extraordinary." The bond hummed between them, still unaccepted, still patient, still burning. "Stay close to me," he said. "Please." She nodded, and they entered the crowd together. It happened an hour into the festival. The music swelled. Wolves danced. Servants carried trays of wine and delicacies. Everything felt perfect, too perfect. Then the lights went out. Screams erupted. Glass shattered. In the darkness, Liora felt bodies pressing close, heard steel singing from sheaths. Someone grabbed her arm viciously, yanking her toward the side corridor. "Time for you to disappear, Omega," a voice hissed. But Liora had grown up surviving. She twisted, drove her elbow into ribs, heard a satisfying gasp. Torches flared back to life, and chaos exploded across the hall. Rogues in dark clothing had infiltrated the crowd. Blades flashed. Lucian's guards engaged immediately, but the attackers moved with purpose, all of them converging on one target. "Liora. Take her," someone shouted. "Dead or gone, just remove her." 5 rogues closed in. Liora grabbed a fallen dagger from the floor, backing against a pillar. Her heart thundered, but her hands stayed steady. "I won't break. I won't run." Lucian roared from across the hall, a sound that made the chandeliers shake, but he was surrounded, fighting his way toward her through the chaos. The first rogue lunged. Liora ducked, slashed upward, felt the blade connect. The second came from the side. She rolled, came up fighting. "I am not prey." "Enough." Anya's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The former queen stood on the raised dais, silver hair gleaming, every inch the ruler she'd once been. Lucian's warriors responded instinctively, pushing the rogues back, creating a circle of protection. "I remember everything," Anya declared, voice carrying across the now silent hall. "I remember the uprising. I remember who orchestrated it. I remember who wanted me dead so they could control my son." She pointed directly at Lady Seraphine and 3 other council members. "Traitors," Anya said. "All of you. You paid rogues to attack the borders. You arranged my disappearance. And when I survived, when this brave woman saved me, you tried to eliminate the witness to your conspiracy." Seraphine's face went white, then red with rage. "Lies. The ravings of a woman whose memory is broken. My memory is clear." Anya's voice was iron. "And I have proof. Letters. Payments. Names." She looked at Lucian. "They've been bleeding your kingdom dry for years, son. Profiting from instability while pretending to serve." Lucian's eyes flashed pure silver. "Guards. Arrest them. All of them." The traitors tried to run. They didn't make it far. The aftermath took hours. Interrogations. Confessions extracted. A council restructured with loyal wolves who served the kingdom, not their own greed. By the time the frost moon reached its peak, justice had been delivered with iron efficiency. Liora sat in a quiet alcove off the great hall, still wearing the blue dress, now torn and bloodstained. Her hands shook with aftershock, but she'd stood. She'd fought. She'd refused to break. Lucian found her there. He knelt before her, this king, this alpha, this man who could command anything, and took her trembling hands in his. "You saved my mother," he said quietly. "You exposed traitors. You stood when everyone expected you to run." His voice cracked. "You are the strongest person I've ever known." "I was terrified," Liora whispered. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's standing despite it." He squeezed her hands gently. "I need to ask you something. And I need you to know, whatever you answer, it changes nothing about my respect for you." She waited, heart pounding. "I don't want to claim you," Lucian said. "I don't want to own you or bind you or take your choices away. I want to stand beside you. As your equal. As your partner." His silver eyes held hers. "Not because fate demands it. But because you choose it. If you choose it." The bond pulsed between them, golden, patient, waiting. Liora had spent a year believing she was unwanted. Believing rejection had broken something fundamental in her. But looking at this man who knelt before her offering partnership instead of dominance, choice instead of destiny, she realized something profound. She had never been broken. She had been waiting for someone who saw her as whole. "I choose you," Liora said, voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Not because you're a king. Not because of the bond. But because you saw me as worthy when everyone else saw me as worthless. Because you offered me freedom when you could have taken control." "Liora. I choose you," she said again, stronger. "As my equal. As my partner. As the man who knelt before me instead of commanding me." The bond ignited. Not with thunder or lightning or the violent claiming of traditional matings. It ignited like sunrise, gentle, warm, inevitable. Golden light seemed to shimmer between them, wrapping around their joined hands, sealing something that had been waiting to be chosen rather than forced. Lucian pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "My queen," he whispered. "Not by conquest. By choice." "Your partner," she corrected softly. "Always your partner." Above them, through the tall windows, the frost moon watched as a rejected Omega became a queen, not because destiny demanded it, but because she chose it. And a kingdom transformed because one woman stopped to help a stranger when everyone else looked away. Outside, wolves howled in celebration. Inside, two souls who'd survived rejection and loss and betrayal finally found what they'd been searching for. Not in destiny's loud demands, but in the quiet, powerful choice to stand together. Destiny is loud, but choice is louder. If you're not like the council members who tried to control through fear and manipulation, if you don't believe people should be forced into bonds or caged for protection, if you stand against anyone who thinks rejection defines worth, subscribe to Seraphina's romance stories, hit that like button, and comment "I choose kindness" to show the manipulators and power-hungry that compassion always wins. The heartless won't understand this story. Don't be heartless.